I'm Claire, 28, and my life changed forever on what was meant to be a simple family trip to Colorado. Their idea of a funny prank? Leaving me at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. They laughed, shouted, "Let's see if she can make it back," and drove off. I never went back, not for 16 years. When they finally found me, I wasn't the same person, but this isn't just about being left behind. It's about being broken down over years and realizing that being discarded was the best thing that ever happened to me. Before I dive into the heart of it, let me know where you're watching or listening from in the comments. And please click the subscribe button and join me as I share. Because sometimes the family you choose is far more important than the family you're born into. Growing up in the Bennett household meant developing thick skin from an early age. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a survival tactic. My parents, Janet and Douglas, truly believed that toughening up their children through a relentless barrage of jokes and pranks was somehow character building. I guess they thought they were forging us into resilient adults. What they actually did was create a dynamic where someone always had to be the target. And that someone was, almost without fail, me. My brothers, Ethan, the oldest at 32, and Logan, who was 30, absorbed our parents' attitude perfectly. Ethan worked in Dad's insurance firm, already being groomed to take over someday. Logan handled the marketing side of the business, a natural fit for his penchant for theatrical setups. They were extensions of my parents' philosophy, turning every family interaction into a potential minefield. Our family album, when I look back at the faded photos now, is filled with moments that looked like celebration but felt, to me, like pure humiliation. I remember my 10th birthday party so vividly. I was just a kid, full of anticipation. They tricked me into believing no one was coming. Hours I spent curled up in my room, sobbing, heartbroken. Then surprise, everyone burst in laughing. "Can't you take a joke, Claire?" they'd chorused. "We're just having fun." It was always that chorus, always. My middle school graduation, a milestone, right? They pretended to forget it entirely. I sat there waiting, feeling the shame and embarrassment burn my cheeks as other families celebrated. They showed up late, intentionally, grinning like mischievous children. "We just wanted to see if you'd finally learn to chill out," Dad had boomed, his laugh the loudest. High school prom night, a rite of passage. They told my date the wrong address. He showed up at the wrong house. I waited, dressed up, feeling ridiculous. The minutes stretching into an eternity of anxiety. When he finally arrived, flustered and apologetic, my family thought it was hilarious. "Classic Claire always making a fuss," Mom had said, a smile playing on her lips. Mom Janet was more subtle with her cruelty. She'd make backhanded compliments about my appearance, especially as I entered my teenage years, when every insecurity felt magnified. "That dress would look beautiful on you if you lost 15 pounds, she'd say, examining me with a critical eye. Or, "Your face would be pretty if you smiled more and fixed your skin." It wasn't direct, but it chipped away at my self-esteem, leaving a constant hum of inadequacy in my mind. Dad's approach was simpler, more brutal. He'd just laugh the loudest, a roaring, booming laugh that validated every cruel prank my brothers pulled on me, making me feel like the butt of a cosmic joke I wasn't allowed to understand. Family dinners often featured detailed, gleeful recounting of the latest hilarious prank they'd pulled on a colleague or friend. It was their bonding ritual, a shared enjoyment of someone else's discomfort. Just 3 weeks before our fateful Colorado trip, I'd graduated from college with a graphic design degree. I was so proud. I'd worked hard. The unspoken expectation, however, was that I'd join the family business too, designing their marketing materials, revamping their websites. It felt like a gilded cage. I'd already expressed interest in applying for jobs at creative agencies in Chicago, where we lived. I dreamed of a vibrant, independent life, surrounded by other artists and designers, but my parents dismissed this as unrealistic. "You can do your little art projects for the company," Mom had said during my graduation dinner, her voice dripping with condescension. "It'll be so much more stable than trying to make it on your own." Financial reality made independence difficult, almost impossible. College had left me with student loans, a crushing weight before I'd even started my career, and my parents had strategically kept me dependent, paying for my apartment, but reminding me constantly that this support could disappear if I didn't appreciate them enough. I was working part-time at a local coffee shop, barely making enough to cover my own small expenses, nowhere near able to support myself fully yet. I felt trapped, desperate for a way out, but seeing no clear path. The Colorado trip was supposedly a celebration of my graduation, a week in a rented cabin near Rocky Mountain National Park. From the moment we piled into our family SUV, the atmosphere was thick with tension, not celebration. "Did you remember to pack a brain this time, Claire?" Logan joked as I loaded my suitcase, making sure to hit my head with a corner of his own. Remember when she forgot her swimsuit during the Florida trip? I had been 16 during that trip. They'd refused to stop so I could buy a new one, then mocked me relentlessly for sitting on the beach, fully clothed for 3 days, my body burning with embarrassment. It was one of many such incidents, designed to exert control and demonstrate their power. The first day of driving on this new trip featured the usual tactics. Ethan, with his maddeningly smug grin, hiding my phone and watching me panic before finding it in his pocket, as if he were a benevolent discoverer. Logan, equally irritating, eating the lunch I'd packed while I was napping, leaving me hungry and frustrated. Dad, always the ringleader, taking a deliberate detour and then blaming my map reading skills, even though I'd clearly pointed out the correct route. Small cruelties, daily jabs that I'd learned to expect, but still, I couldn't quite get used to them. They always stung. That night at the hotel in Nebraska, I overheard them in the adjoining room. Their voices, muffled but clear enough, drifted through the thin wall. "She's too sensitive, Haas," Mom was saying, her tone exasperated. "The real world is going to eat her alive if she doesn't toughen up." Dad's gruff reply filled the silence. "Maybe this trip will finally teach her to stop being such a pushover." A knot tightened in my stomach. I pulled the blanket closer, trying to stay positive, trying to mentally escape. Just 5 more days, I kept telling myself. 5 more days of this torment. Then I could go home. I could focus on job applications and finally start building my own life. A life free from their jabs, their jokes, their suffocating control. I had no idea how prophetic that thought would be, or that the next day would be the last time I ever traveled with my family. The second day of our road trip began with an unusually pleasant atmosphere. I remember feeling a cautious sense of relief, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd decided to be decent. Looking back, I should have recognized this for what it was. The calm before the storm. The family being nice, almost overly so, right before executing a particularly cruel prank, was a familiar and chilling pattern. My guard should have been up. We crossed from Nebraska into Wyoming around noon. The landscape shifted, vast rolling plains stretching out to the horizon, with distant mountains, hazy and blue, visible in the distance. It was beautiful, desolate, and utterly unfamiliar. "We need to fill up," Dad announced as we approached a small town called Pinridge. He pulled into a gas station. It was one of those independent places, not a major chain, with a small convenience store attached. It sat on the very edge of town, with nothing but open, empty land surrounding it on 3 sides. Isolated, a perfect stage, though I didn't realize it then. "I'm going to use the restroom and grab some snacks," I told them, trying to sound cheerful, trying to believe this was a normal stop. Dad was already pumping gas, his back to me. "Anyone want anything?" "Get me a Coke," Ethan mumbled, not looking up from his phone, immersed in some game. "Grab me some beef jerky," Logan added, his eyes similarly glued to a screen. Mom just shook her head, busy reapplying her lipstick in the visor mirror, her reflection her only concern. Their nonchalance, the way they barely acknowledged my presence, was utterly typical. I felt like an errand runner, a background character in their self-absorbed play. Inside, the convenience store was quiet. I used the restroom, taking a moment to splash water on my face, to try and reset my emotions. Then I spent a few minutes selecting snacks, a small act of normalcy I clung to. The store was empty except for the cashier, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Nina. "Yeah." She looked up and offered a gentle smile. I paid for the family's requests: the Coke, the beef jerky, plus a bottle of water and some chips for myself. "You folks just passing through?" Nina asked as she handed me my change, her voice soft and friendly. "Yeah, heading to Colorado for vacation," I replied, trying to project a sense of carefree excitement I didn't feel. Well, enjoy your trip, she said, her smile unwavering. Those ordinary words. Enjoy your trip. They would echo in my mind for years afterward, a haunting reminder of the last normal moment before everything changed, the last moment before my world imploded. I pushed open the door to the parking lot, juggling the bags of snacks. The Wyoming sun beat down, deceptively warm. I stopped dead in my tracks. The spot where our SUV had been parked was empty. My mind reeled. I blinked, momentarily confused, thinking I'd somehow gotten turned around and was looking in the wrong direction. But a quick, frantic scan of the entire lot confirmed what seemed impossible. My family was gone. My first thought was a desperate attempt to rationalize. Dad must have moved the car. To the air pump, maybe? Or another part of the station. I walked around the small building, checking every corner of the property. Nothing, no SUV, no familiar faces. The sick feeling, a familiar knot of dread, began to form in my stomach. They probably just went up the street to that sandwich place I saw on the way in, I reasoned aloud, my voice shaky, trying to convince myself. But even as I said it, the words felt hollow. This wasn't like them. This was too much. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, and called Dad. It rang and rang until it went to voicemail. I tried Mom, voicemail, then Ethan, voicemail. Finally, I called Logan. He answered on the fourth ring. "Where are you guys?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, to sound calm, but the tremor was unmistakable. The sound of laughter, clear and unapologetic, came through the phone, a collective, joyful sound. "Oh, we're about 20 miles down the road now," he said, not bothering to hide his amusement, a cruel edge in his tone. My voice rose, raw with panic. "What? Turn around and come get me." "Let's see if she can make it back on her own," I heard Ethan yell in the background, followed by more laughter, a cacophony of their cruel mirth. "Logan, this isn't funny. Tell Dad to turn around now." I was pacing, my heart racing, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "Check your messages," he said, his voice clipped, before hanging up. A text from Ethan had come through while I was still on the phone. It contained a photo, all of them, in the car, grinning widely, their faces smiling and triumphant. The caption burned into my eyes. "Survival of the fittest, sis. Find your way home." I called back immediately. Voicemail. Called Mom. Voicemail. Dad. Voicemail. Ethan. Voicemail. They had all blocked my number. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't coming back. They had cut me off. I stood in the parking lot, the Wyoming sun beating down on me, relentless and unforgiving, as the horrifying reality of my situation loudly, agonizingly sank in. They had left me, deliberately, in a town I'd never heard of, in a state where I knew no one, with nothing but my small purse and the clothes on my back. My suitcase, with all my clothes, my toiletries, everything I owned for this trip, was in the trunk of their SUV. I checked my wallet, $43 in cash, my debit card, with maybe a couple hundred in my account, my ID. My phone battery was at 18%, a terrifyingly low number, ticking down with every passing minute. As the afternoon wore on, I sat on the curb outside the gas station, a solitary, bewildered figure. I cycled through a desperate cocktail of disbelief, blinding panic, and a cold, simmering rage. I kept checking my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, expecting a message. A text saying they were turning around, that the joke had run its course, that they'd finally had their laugh and now it was over. Instead, I received a group chat photo of them at dinner in a restaurant. The caption, "Wonder if Claire found dinner yet," followed by an emoji. Rolling on the floor, laughing. It was a punch to the gut. They weren't coming back. They were enjoying my misery. Nina approached me cautiously as she was ending her shift. Her kind eyes held a flicker of concern. "Honey, you've been sitting here for 3 hours. Are you okay?" The simple question, the unexpected kindness. It broke the dam. Through tears, hot and uncontrollable, I explained my situation. The words tumbled out, raw and painful. "My family left you here on purpose?" Her incredulous tone mirrored my own. "They think it's funny," I choked out, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "A character-building exercise or something? They've done things like this before, but never this bad." "Do you have anyone you can call? Friends back home?" she asked gently. I shook my head, feeling the full weight of the isolation my family had cultivated around me. They had subtly discouraged close friendships, making me dependent on them for everything, for social interaction, for financial support. That dependency, that careful cultivation of my helplessness, had never been more apparent, more suffocating. My closest friend had moved to California last month. I didn't know anyone who could drive all the way out here. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Night was falling, the temperature dropping rapidly with the sun. My phone battery was now at a terrifying 8%. I had one more call to make, a Hail Mary. Dad answered surprisingly. His voice was cold, devoid of warmth. "Have you learned your lesson yet?" he asked without preamble, without even a hello. "What lesson?" My voice was hoarse from crying, brittle with unshed tears. "That I can't trust my own family?" "Don't be so dramatic, figure it out yourself. Consider this life training," he said coldly, dismissively. "Call us when you've made it back to Chicago." "How am I supposed to do that with no money and nowhere to stay?" I demanded, desperation creeping into my tone. "You're a smart girl. Get creative." He hung up. Just like that. I stared at my phone in disbelief as it displayed one final message from my mother. A message that crystallized their true intentions, their twisted idea of love. "This is for your own good, Claire. You need to learn self-reliance." Then my phone died. The screen went black. The silence was deafening. Nina, bless her heart, had overheard enough. "I know someone who rents out a room in her house," she said, her voice firm, practical. "Her name's Eleanor. Let me call her for you." As darkness enveloped the small Wyoming town, a profound realization washed over me. I had a choice to make. Desperately try to get back to the people who had abandoned me, to crawl back to their mercy, or take the first terrifying step towards something else entirely, towards a life where I didn't need them. Eleanor turned out to be a silver-haired woman in her 60s, who lived in a small, cozy yellow house 3 blocks from Pinridge's Main Street. Her spare room was simple, a twin bed, a dresser, and a small desk. But it was clean, bathed in soft lamplight, and felt safer than any option I'd considered during my panicked afternoon. "Nina explained your situation," Eleanor said as she showed me around, her voice calm and reassuring. "You can stay here tonight, and we'll figure out next steps in the morning." She lent me a nightgown and some basic toiletries. Her kindness was a balm to my raw, aching soul. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed that night, the unfamiliar quiet of a small town settling around me, I cried until no more tears would come. Part of me, a small, hopeful, foolish part, still expected to wake up to apologetic texts or missed calls. My family, having realized they'd taken things too far. Morning came with no such reprieve. Eleanor let me use her landline to call my parents' number, which I still knew by heart. No answer. I tried the family business line. The receptionist, clearly instructed, said my parents and brothers were in a meeting and took a message. They never called back. The silence from them was a definitive statement. "I need to charge my phone and check my bank account," I told Eleanor over the simple breakfast she'd prepared, her oatmeal warm and comforting. "I need to figure out how to get back to Chicago." I still clung to the idea of returning, of fixing this, of making them see what they'd done. But when I finally got my phone working again, the messages that awaited me only confirmed what I was beginning to accept. This joke wasn't ending anytime soon. "Day 2 of Claire's great adventure," read a text from Ethan, accompanied by a photo of them hiking in Colorado, their faces bright with manufactured enjoyment. "Have you started hitchhiking yet?" from Logan, a sneer I could almost hear. And then the most devastating from my father. "Called your apartment manager. Rent's not being paid while you're figuring this out. Consider it motivation." My mother had added, "This is what tough love looks like, honey. You'll thank us someday." The words were a hammer blow. My apartment, my last tether to a life I thought was mine. Gone. I checked my bank account. $237.42. Not even enough for a bus ticket back to Chicago, let alone first and last month's rent on a new place when I got there. They had truly left me with nothing. Eleanor found me sitting on the porch steps, staring blankly at my phone, the screen a cruel mirror of my shattered dreams. "Bad news?" she asked gently, her voice full of quiet understanding. "They're not coming back," I said, my voice hollow, raw. "And they've stopped paying for my apartment. I have nowhere to go back to." Instead of the pity I expected, Eleanor's face showed something closer to determination. "Then you stay here," she said, her voice firm, kind. "Until you figure out your next move. I charge $300 a month for the room, but you can work at my bookstore to cover it until you get on your feet." "Your bookstore?" I asked, looking up, a faint spark of something, anything, stirring within me. "Pages and Poems on Main Street. I could use help a few days a week. It doesn't pay much, but it's something." That afternoon, Eleanor showed me around the small bookstore she'd owned for 30 years. It was charming, filled with the comforting scent of old paper and new ideas, but clearly struggling. Outdated signage, a barely functional website that she'd paid a nephew to create years ago. It had a quiet dignity, a soul, but it needed help. "I also need a job that pays actual money," I told her, my practical side kicking in, pushing back against the overwhelming despair. "For food and saving up too, to figure out what's next." The next day, driven by a fierce, desperate need to survive, I applied at every business in downtown Pinneridge. By sunset, I had a waitressing job at the Pinewood Diner, working the breakfast and lunch shift 6 days a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was money. It was a start. My first week passed in a blur of exhaustion and periodic crying jags. I worked from 6 a.m. to 2:00 p.m. at the diner, serving coffee and pancakes to the surprisingly friendly locals. Took a short break, then helped Eleanor at the bookstore until closing, dusting shelves, organizing books, helping customers. Every night, before collapsing into bed, I checked my phone. And every night, the messages from my family came more sporadic, less apologetic, more dismissive. "Still waiting for that call saying you've made it home," my dad texted on day 5, as if I were a child playing a game. By the end of the second week, they'd stopped messaging altogether. The finality of it was both crushing and strangely liberating. One day after my shift, I was crying in the break room at the diner. My coworker Amber found me. At 25, she was a single mother working 2 jobs, and she recognized the look of someone at the end of their rope. Her face was kind, unjudgmental. "Family trouble?" she asked, sitting beside me, offering a quiet solidarity. The whole story poured out of me. The years of cruel jokes, the abandonment, the callous texts, every raw, humiliating detail. When I finished, Amber was quiet for a long moment, simply listening. Then she said something that changed my perspective entirely. Something that hit me with the force of a revelation. "Sounds like they did you a favor by leaving you here," she stated, her voice calm, clear. "What? Those aren't pranks, Claire. That's abuse. And now you have a chance to build a life without it." Her words resonated deep within me. They sliced through the fog of shame and self-blame that had always clouded my perception of my family. Abuse, not jokes, not tough love. Abuse. That night, lying awake in Eleanor's quiet spare room, I made a decision, a profound, life-altering decision. I wasn't going to desperately scramble to get back to Chicago. I wasn't going to beg for the return of a family that had proven, repeatedly, that they didn't truly care about my well-being. I was going to stay in Pinneridge, at least for now. I was going to build something here, something real. The next day, a renewed sense of purpose coursed through me. I used the bookstore's old computer to email my college professors, explaining my unexpected situation and humbly asking for references. I created a new email address, one my family didn't know, a small but significant act of severing ties. I began researching how to replace my ID documents, which were back in my apartment in Chicago, now likely cleared out. It was a painstaking process, but each step felt like building a new foundation. "You're good with design, right?" Eleanor asked me one evening as we were closing up the store, her eyes twinkling. The store could really use new flyers and maybe some social media help. It was the first chance I'd had to use my degree since graduating, to apply my passion for something productive and meaningful, rather than just corporate marketing materials. I poured myself into it. I created a fresh, modern flyer for an upcoming author event, vibrant and inviting. Eleanor was thrilled with the results. "This is incredible, Claire," she exclaimed, holding it up, her face beaming. "You should meet Mason," she suggested. "He does web development for businesses around town. He might have some work for someone with your skills." Mason turned out to be a bearded, thoughtful 30-something who worked remotely for tech companies, taking advantage of Pinneridge's low cost of living and easy access to the mountains for his outdoor pursuits. He was quiet but sharp. He took one look at my portfolio from college, filled with bright conceptual pieces, and nodded approvingly. "I could use someone to handle the visual side of some client projects," he said, a directness I appreciated. "I'm terrible at anything requiring artistic talent. Want to learn some coding while you're at it? Might make you more marketable." For the first time since being abandoned, since that searing pain of realization, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just for survival, but for building something meaningful, something I was good at, something that was truly mine. My family had thrown me away, expecting me to come crawling back, broken and desperate. Instead, I was finding my footing, not just surviving, but slowly, surely building a new life on my own terms. A life that was becoming more vibrant, more authentic, with every passing day. As my first month in Pinneridge came to a close, a final familiar text appeared on my phone screen, from my mother. "This silence is very immature, Claire. Call us when you've grown up." I didn't hesitate this time. I blocked their numbers one by one, a deliberate, defiant act of severance. I turned my focus entirely toward the future, towards this new life blooming around me. The downtown of Pinneridge consisted of just 4 blocks of businesses, a small but vibrant strip. The Pinewood Diner anchored one end, its neon sign a beacon in the early morning. Pages and Poems. Bookstore, Eleanor's Sanctuary, stood proudly near the other. Between my shifts at both places, I quickly became a familiar face to the locals. People stopped asking if I was just passing through and started greeting me by name. "Morning, Claire," became a regular chorus as I hurried down Main Street from the diner to the bookstore, a part of the fabric of this small town. Eleanor's bookstore website was my first real project with Mason. Working evenings, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove myself, I rebuilt it from scratch with his guidance. I integrated an online ordering system, added a clean, modern design that highlighted upcoming events and local author spotlights. It was a labor of love, a testament to my skills, and a symbol of my new beginning. "This is incredible, Claire," Eleanor exclaimed when I revealed the finished site, her eyes wide with delight. "Business is up 15% since you put those event posters in the window, and this will help even more." Mason was equally impressed. "You've got a natural talent for UI design," he told me after our third coding session, his usual stoic demeanor softened by a rare smile. "You're picking this up faster than most of my clients ever do." His praise, unlike my family's backhanded compliments, felt genuine, earned. At the diner, Amber introduced me to her circle of friends. Other young people who had either grown up in Pinneridge or, like me, had landed there seeking affordable living and a close, supportive community. For the first time in my life, I was making genuine connections with people who seemed to like me for who I was, not what I could do for them or how I could entertain them at my expense. It was a revelation. During my second month in town, I received an email from my Chicago landlord, cold and official, asking about my plans for my belongings. I'd missed 2 months of rent, and they needed to clear the apartment. It was a sharp pang, a reminder of the life I'd left behind, but also a final necessary cut. "I can't afford to come to get anything," I wrote back, my fingers aching on the keyboard. "Please donate whatever's useful and dispose of the rest." It was a painful email to send, surrendering the physical remnants of my previous life, but it was also strangely liberating. The possessions my family had given me over the years had always come with strings attached, with implicit reminders of how grateful I should be, how much I owed them. Starting fresh meant freedom from those constant debts of gratitude. It was a shedding of old skin. Mason, always thinking, connected me with a small business owner in a neighboring town who needed logo design and marketing materials. It was my first freelance client, my first independent step as a designer. And though the pay was modest, the sense of accomplishment was enormous, a swelling pride in my chest. "You should think about building this into something real," Mason suggested over coffee one morning, his eyes thoughtful. "There's no decent design agency within 100 miles, and these small businesses really need the help. They're all trying to establish online presences without the skills to do it properly." The idea took root. It blossomed. By my third month in Pinneridge, I had 3 regular freelance clients alongside my work at the diner and bookstore. I'd saved enough to move out of Eleanor's spare room and into a tiny studio apartment above the hardware store on Main Street. It was barely 400 square feet, a compact, humble space, but it was mine. The first space I'd ever had that wasn't contingent on my family's approval, wasn't a reminder of their conditional support. The morning I moved in, I bought a small potted succulent, a vibrant green, as a housewarming gift to myself. "This is the first day of your new life," I told myself, my voice a whisper in the quiet apartment as I placed it on the windowsill, letting the sunlight warm its leaves. No more looking back. That same afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar Chicago number. Thinking it might be about my old apartment, a final detail, I answered. "Claire, it's Ethan, don't hang up." His voice, usually so confident, was uncharacteristically serious, almost hesitant. My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" "We're worried about you, Itzad," he said. "It's been 3 months, the joke's over. Where are you?" "Joke." The word ignited something in me. A hot, furious spark. "Joke? You abandoned me in another state with no money and no way home. You cut off my apartment. That's not a joke. That's cruelty." My voice, though low, was laced with an anger I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel until that moment. "Come on, we thought you'd find a way back within a week. When you didn't call, we figured you were just being stubborn." His voice started to slip back into its familiar, dismissive tone. "I'm not coming back, Ethan," I said firmly, my voice gaining strength. "I've started over. Don't be ridiculous. What are you doing for money? Where are you living?" The familiar condescension in his voice, the instant assumption of my failure, strengthened my resolve, cementing my resolve. "I have a job, 2 actually, plus freelance design clients. I have my own apartment. I'm doing fine without any of you." The silence on his end was long, telling. "Mom and Dad want to talk to you." "I don't want to talk to them, or you. Don't call me again." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. Then I sat on my new second-hand couch, the cheap fabric a little rough against my skin, and shook, with anger, with pride. They had expected me to fail, to beg for rescue, to come crawling back. Instead, I was building something they had never believed I could, something they couldn't touch. Over the next few months, they tried reaching me through various means. Emails from new addresses, calls from different numbers, even a letter to the diner after someone apparently told them where I worked. Each attempt was a little sting, a reminder of their presence, but I ignored them all. I was focused. By the 6-month mark, I had built enough of a client base to quit the diner and focus entirely on design work and helping Eleanor with the bookstore. Mason and I had developed a business partnership of sorts, with him handling web development and me managing design for joint clients. We were a formidable team, complementing each other's strengths. "You know what you should do, Claire?" Mason said one evening as we finished a particularly challenging client project, leaning back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Register a business name. Make this official." The next day, filled with a surge of purpose and newfound confidence, I filed the paperwork for New Horizon Design Studio. It was more than a business name. It was a declaration, a statement of independence. As my first year in Pinneridge approached, I found myself reflecting on how completely my life had transformed. The scared, stranded young woman crying outside a gas station, clutching her dying phone, was now a business owner with friends, colleagues, and a community that valued her. The family that had discarded me had, inadvertently, given me the greatest gift, the push I needed to discover my own strength. Eleanor hosted a small gathering at the bookstore to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of my redesigned website, and privately, my year in Pinneridge. I looked around at the faces of people who had become my chosen family. Amber, her bright eyes shining, her young son Tyler clutching her hand. Mason, a quiet anchor of support. The regular bookstore customers who had become friends, stopping by just to chat. Even Nina, the kind cashier from the gas station who had unknowingly set me on this path. I realized I had built something my biological family had never given me, a circle of genuine connection based on mutual respect rather than power and humiliation. "To new beginnings," Eleanor toasted, raising her glass of sparkling cider, her face alight with joy. "And to finding home," I added, my voice thick with emotion, "in the place you least expected." And 2 years after being abandoned in Pinneridge, my design business had grown enough that I occasionally traveled to meet with larger clients in nearby cities. It was during one such trip to Denver that my carefully constructed new life collided abruptly with the past I'd been so diligently avoiding. I was sitting in a bustling coffee shop near the 16th Street Mall, immersed in my laptop, preparing for a client meeting. The aroma of roasted coffee beans and the murmur of conversations filled the air. Then a familiar voice, sharp and incredulous, cut through the ambient noise. "Claire, is that you?" I looked up. Ethan, my brother, standing 3 feet away, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. He was dressed in a sharp business suit, clearly in Denver for work himself. My heart gave a sickening lurch, a cold wave washing over me. "Ethan," my voice came out steadier than I felt, a testament to the new composure I'd built. "Holy shit, it is you." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down without asking, his eyes sweeping over me, taking in every detail. "We've been looking for you for over a year." "I wasn't lost," I replied, closing my laptop, signaling the end of my work and the beginning of an unwanted confrontation. I chose to stay away. Ethan looked me over again, more thoroughly this time, his gaze lingering on my professional attire, the portfolio case beside my computer, the newfound confidence that I carried like a shield. "You look different." "I am different." I took a slow sip of my coffee, using the action to hide the trembling in my hands. "What are you doing in Denver?" "Insurance conference. Dad and I are presenting tomorrow." He leaned forward, his voice dropping, taking on a tone I recognized, a manipulative earnestness. "Claire, you need to come home. This has gone on long enough." "This isn't a standoff, Ethan. This is my life now. I have a business, clients, friends, in Wyoming." He scoffed, a short, derisive sound that grated on my nerves. "Come on." "Yes, in Wyoming." The familiar dismissal in his tone, the instant invalidation of my choices, rekindled old anger, hot and sharp. "The place you all left me for dead." "Don't be so dramatic. We knew you had your phone and money." His voice was dismissive, but a hint of discomfort flickered in his eyes. "I had $43 in a phone that died the same day you abandoned me," I said flatly, my voice controlled, precise. "You cut off my apartment. You left me with nothing." Ethan, to his credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable, a slight flush rising on his neck. "Look, things got out of hand. We thought you'd find a way back within a few days. A week tops. When you didn't call, Dad figured you were staying with a friend, teaching us a lesson. By the time we realized you really weren't coming back, it had been 6 months. Then we started looking." "And then you started looking for me out of concern?" The skepticism in my voice was clear, cutting. "Mom was worried sick. She couldn't sleep." "Strange," I interjected, a humorless smile touching my lips. "Since she texted me that abandoning me was tough love and I should grow up." Ethan sighed, a performative sound of exasperation. "Can we start over? The family misses you. Dad's retiring next year, and he wants to make amends before he does." "Make amends?" I gave a short, humorless laugh, a bitter sound that escaped my throat. "For a lifetime of humiliation disguised as humor, culminating in abandonment? How exactly does he plan to do that?" "Just come back for a visit, see everyone. They've changed, Claire." Years of suppressed emotions, the hurt, the anger, the profound sense of betrayal, suddenly rushed to the surface, overwhelming my composure. "They haven't changed, Ethan, and neither have you. You're sitting here in another state trying to convince me that deliberately leaving your sister stranded was somehow justified, that I should just forgive and forget. Because it's convenient for all of you now." My voice had risen, and nearby customers were glancing our way. Curiosity in their eyes. I didn't care. "Do you have any idea what that felt like?" I demanded, my voice raw with the resurfacing pain. "To stand in that parking lot, realizing my family, my own flesh and blood, had decided I was disposable? To see those texts laughing about whether I'd found dinner while I was panicking about where I would sleep?" Ethan's expression hardened, his facade of concern crumbling away, replaced by annoyance. "Keep your voice down, you're making a scene." "A scene?" I was nearly shouting now, the fury finally breaking free. "That's what you're worried about? A scene?" I stood up, gathering my things, my portfolio, my purse. "This conversation is over." Ethan grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly tight, desperate. "You don't get to walk away. The family has been worried sick. Do you know what people think happened to you?" There are rumors that you had a breakdown, that you're living on the streets. Is that what you want people to think? I yanked my arm free, pulling away with all my strength. I don't care what people think. I care about building a life where I'm not constantly belittled and manipulated by the people who are supposed to love me. You always were too sensitive, Ethan snapped, his friendly facade completely gone, revealing the true contempt beneath. This is why we had to toughen you up. You fall apart at the slightest criticism. Criticism? I was beyond shouting now, my voice hoarse, cracking with emotion. You call abandonment criticism? You call mocking a terrified young woman toughening her up? My hands were balled into fists at my sides, trembling. If you don't come home willingly, Ethan threatened, his voice low, menacing, I'll tell everyone what really happened. How you had a meltdown over a simple joke and ran away from your family. How you've been hiding out all this time, ignoring your dying father's attempts to reconcile. Dad is dying? For a fleeting moment, concern overrode my anger, a flicker of the old fear for their well-being. But Ethan's slight hesitation, the flicker in his eyes, told me everything I needed to know. He was lying, again. He's not in good health, he amended quickly, his voice losing its conviction. You're lying again. I shook my head in disgust, a profound weariness washing over me. Goodbye, Ethan. As I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him gaping, Ethan called after me, his voice echoing in the busy mall. This isn't over, Claire. The family has a right to know where you are. I made it to my rental car before the tears came. Not tears of sadness, not fear, but of pure burning rage. The encounter had ripped open wounds I thought had healed, leaving me raw and exposed. But it had also crystallized something incredibly important. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize or make amends. I wasn't the one who had done something unforgivable. They were. I called my client and rescheduled our meeting. Then, without a second thought, I drove straight back to Pine Ridge, my mind racing the entire 3-hour journey. Ethan now knew I was in Wyoming. It wouldn't take much for him to figure out which town if he started asking around. I needed to protect my new life, my chosen family. The next morning, I went to Eleanor's house and told her everything. About the encounter with Ethan, his threats, my fears that my family might try to intrude on the life I'd built. They can try, Eleanor said firmly, her jaw set with quiet determination. But this is your home now, Claire. We've got your back. That afternoon, I gathered my closest friends, Eleanor, Mason, Amber, and a few others who had become my pillars of support. I shared the full, unvarnished story of my family's abuse and abandonment, details I'd kept vague until now. Their faces, usually so open, contorted with shock, then anger. If any of you get calls or questions from people looking for me, now you know the truth, I concluded, my voice steady, resolute. These people sound toxic as hell, Amber said, squeezing my hand, her eyes flashing with protectiveness. We won't let them near you if you don't want to see them. Their unwavering support strengthened my resolve, anchoring me to my present. I returned to my apartment and wrote a long, detailed email to my parents and brothers, the first contact I'd initiated in 2 years. I am safe and successful, I wrote, each word a defiant statement. I have built a life without your cruelty and manipulation. I do not want reconciliation. I do not want contact. Any attempt to force yourselves back into my life will be met with legal action. This is not negotiable. I hit send, a tremor running through me, then blocked their email addresses once more. The finality of it was absolute. That night, lying awake in my apartment, not with tears, but with a profound sense of peace, I realized that the encounter with Ethan, painful as it had been, had given me something invaluable, certainty. There was no doubt left, no lingering question of whether I had overreacted or whether my family might have changed. They were exactly who they had always been. And so was I. Except now I was stronger, strong enough to walk away from toxicity, even when it came from the people who were supposed to love me most. Strong enough to build a life on my own terms. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt since the day I was abandoned. I opened my laptop and began designing a new logo for New Horizon Design Studio, one that symbolized not just a business, but a personal transformation. The old broken butterfly, the tattered map. They were gone. The new design was a soaring eagle, wings spread wide, gazing towards a sunrise. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had created from the ruins. 5 years after the day my family abandoned me in Wyoming, I stood in the newly expanded offices of New Horizon Design Agency, a thriving, bustling space filled with creative energy. My team of 10 employees collaborated on projects for clients across 3 states. What had begun as a desperate need to survive had evolved into a thriving business that specialized in branding and digital presence for small to mid-sized companies throughout the Mountain West region. Our offices occupied the entire second floor of a renovated historic building on Pine Ridge's Main Street, a far cry from my early days working from a corner of Eleanor's bookstore. The exposed brick walls displayed framed examples of our best work, each one a testament to our growth. The large windows overlooked the town that had become my true home, the familiar Main Street, the diner, the bookstore. "The Denver client just signed off on the final designs," announced Megan, my first full-time hire and now creative director, her voice bright with excitement. "They want to talk about Phase 2 next month." "That's our third major contract this quarter," I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice, a quiet, deep satisfaction settling within me. "Schedule the meeting and let's start brainstorming expanded services we can offer them." My phone buzzed with a text from Sam, the community college professor I'd been dating for the past 2 years. We'd met when he came into Pages and Poems looking for books on local history for a course he was teaching. Eleanor, ever the matchmaker, had introduced us. After months of friendly conversations that gradually deepened into something more, we'd become inseparable. He was kind, intelligent, and truly saw me, in a way no one ever had. "Dinner at 7, I'm cooking that pasta you like," his message read, simple and warm. "Can't wait, bringing dessert," I replied, a smile blooming on my face. At 33, I had built a life that felt authentic and meaningful. My closest friends had become family. Eleanor was like the supportive mother I'd never had, always there with a listening ear and wise advice. Amber's son, Tyler, now a chatty 6-year-old, called me Auntie Claire, a title that warmed my heart more than any biological connection ever could. Mason and I had developed a professional partnership that complemented both our skills, with our businesses often collaborating on larger projects, celebrating each other's successes. 3 months earlier, Sam and I had purchased a small house together on the edge of town, a charming craftsman with a studio space where I could work from home when I wanted to, and a garden that was slowly taking shape under our inexperienced but enthusiastic care. It was a home filled with laughter, with quiet moments of shared joy, with the deep comfort of belonging. I was locking up the office that evening when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would let unknown calls go to voicemail, but we had several new client prospects, so I answered, my voice professional and brisk. "Is this Claire Bennett of New Horizon Design?" a woman's voice asked, crisp and formal. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" "My name is Jennifer Atkins. I'm an editor at Business West magazine. We're doing a feature on women entrepreneurs who've built successful businesses in unexpected places. Your agency was recommended to us multiple times during our research." The interview she requested led to a 4-page spread in the magazine 3 months later, a glossy, impressive testament to my journey. It featured photos of our office, my talented team, and me, standing confidently in front of the business I'd built from nothing. The article told the story of a young designer who had moved to a small Wyoming town and identified an unmet need for professional design services in rural communities. I had shared only the broad strokes of my journey with the magazine, omitting the abandonment and family estrangement. Those details belonged to me, not to public consumption, but the piece powerfully emphasized how I had arrived in Pine Ridge with almost nothing and built something substantial through sheer determination and unwavering community support. It was a triumphant narrative, and it was true. 2 weeks after the magazine hit newsstands, the emails began arriving, first from my mother, then my father, then each of my brothers. Subject lines ranged from "We need to talk" to "Saw your article" to "Please respond." I deleted them all without reading them, a quick flick of my thumb, each deletion a reaffirmation of my boundaries. Then came the phone calls to the agency, which my office manager fielded with the instructions I'd given her years ago. "Ms. Bennett does not accept personal calls from these numbers." I thought that would be the end of it. I truly did. But I underestimated my mother's determination. On a Tuesday afternoon, I returned from lunch, the scent of fresh air still clinging to me, to find Janet Bennett sitting in our reception area. She looked older, lines etched around her eyes, but just as impeccably put together as I remembered, her expensive clothes perfectly pressed, her posture regal. "Mom," I said, stopping dead in the doorway, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "How did you find me?" She stood smoothing her expensive slacks, her eyes tracking over me, noting my professional attire, my confident posture, a subtle assessment in her gaze. "The magazine article had your business address." "You look well," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "I am well," I replied, my voice neutral, careful, giving nothing away. "Why are you here? Can we talk somewhere private?" She glanced around at my curious employees, who had no idea of the significance of this visitor, their boss's estranged mother. I considered refusing, telling her to leave and never come back. Part of me yearned to, but after 5 years of healing and growth, after building this unshakable foundation, I found I was more curious than afraid. What could she possibly have to say that would matter now? What could she possibly offer? "My office," I said, leading her down the hallway, past curious employees who watched our every move, past the awards on my wall, the framed examples of success that filled the space. Once the door closed behind us, creating a bubble of privacy, Janet took in the awards on my wall, the sweeping view from my window, the indisputable evidence of success all around her. "This is impressive," she admitted, her voice low. "The magazine didn't do it justice." "Thank you," I said, remaining standing, my stance firm, unyielding. "But I doubt you came all this way to compliment my office." Janet's composure cracked slightly, her shoulders slumped. A sigh escaped her lips. "We've been trying to find you for years, Claire. Your father even hired a private investigator after Ethan saw you in Denver, but you'd covered your tracks well." "I wasn't hiding," I corrected her, my voice gentle but firm. "I was living my life. There's a difference." "We made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice breaking, the carefully constructed facade finally crumbling. "What started as a stupid prank went too far, and then pride and stubbornness kept everyone from admitting it. By the time we realized how serious it was, you were gone." "It wasn't just the abandonment," I said quietly, the words aching slightly as they left my lips. "It was a lifetime of cruelty disguised as humor. It was teaching me that love meant enduring humiliation. It was creating a family dynamic where someone always had to be the target, and that target was always me." The weight of those memories, though lighter now, still had substance. Tears welled in my mother's eyes, glistening. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. "I know, I see that now." Her voice was thick with emotion, sounding genuinely pained. "Your father would never admit it. But when we saw that magazine article, you building this successful business, looking so confident and happy, it forced us to face what we'd done, not just that day in Wyoming, but your whole life." "What do you want from me, Mom? Forgiveness? A family reunion?" I asked, my voice still neutral, searching for the catch, the manipulation. "I want a chance," she said simply, meeting my gaze, her eyes surprisingly clear. "A chance to know the woman you've become. A chance to be better than I was." I studied her, searching for the manipulation that had characterized our relationship for so long. Instead, I saw something unfamiliar, something that disarmed me. Genuine regret, a deep, sorrowful regret that felt real. "I can't give you what you want," I said finally, the words measured, careful. "Too much has happened. Too much pain has been inflicted. But I can tell you that I'm happy here. I've built a good life with good people who value me. And knowing that, that should be enough." Janet nodded slowly, wiping her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Your brothers want to see you, your father too, though he'd never ask." "I'm not ready for that," I told her, my voice soft but firm. "I may never be ready, and that has to be okay." She stood to leave, her shoulders still slumped. Then she hesitated, turning back to me, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "You were always the strongest of us all, Claire. It just took us losing you to realize it." After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, the quiet office filled only with the hum of the computers, processing the encounter. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no falling into each other's arms with forgiveness and tears. Just the beginning of a recognition that the past couldn't be undone, but perhaps, just perhaps, it could be acknowledged. That evening, as Sam and I sat on our porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in hues of orange and purple, I told him about my mother's visit. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, his arm around my shoulders, his presence a comforting weight. "Surprisingly peaceful," I replied, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of his body. For so long I was defined by what they did to me. Today I realize that chapter truly is closed. I'm not the abandoned daughter anymore. I'm just Claire, business owner, community member, partner. I turned to smile at him, feeling a deep contentment settle in my soul. And I like who I've become. The next day I sent my mother a brief email with a single photo attached. Me with my team, standing proudly outside our office building, all of us smiling. No invitation to visit again, no promises of reconciliation, just a glimpse of the life I'd built, the person I'd become. It was all I was ready to give. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 16 years after being abandoned at that Wyoming gas station, a lifetime seemed to have passed. I stood in my kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through the window, staring at a certified letter that had just arrived. The return address was from a law firm in Chicago that I didn't recognize. A familiar knot of trepidation tightened in my stomach. With a sense of cautious curiosity, I opened it. "Dear Miss Bennett," it began. "We represent the estate of Douglas and Janet Bennett. We are writing to inform you that Bennett Insurance Group has been sold, and as per your parents' instructions, the proceeds are to be divided equally among their 3 children." I sat down at the counter, my legs suddenly unsteady. The letter continued with legal details and a request for contact to arrange the transfer of funds. A substantial amount according to the preliminary figures included. A legacy I never expected. Sam found me still sitting there 10 minutes later when he came home from work, his briefcase in hand, a question in his eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "My parents sold the family business," I said, my voice quiet, passing him the letter. "They're splitting the money between Ethan, Logan, and me." Sam read quickly, his eyebrows rising at the surprising amount. "That's unexpected." "There's more," I said, holding up an envelope that had been enclosed with the legal documents. A personal letter from my mother. I hadn't opened it yet, unsure if I wanted to know what it contained. In the years since Janet's visit to my office, our contact had been minimal, occasional emails, a Christmas card once or twice. I had maintained firm boundaries, rebuffing attempts at deeper reconciliation while acknowledging the small, cautious steps toward change I had observed in them. "Do you want me to leave you alone to read it?" Sam asked gently, his hand resting lightly on my arm. I shook my head. "Stay, please." The letter inside was handwritten on my mother's personal stationery, her elegant script instantly recognizable. "Dear Claire," it read, "by the time you receive this, the sale of the business will be complete. Your father has finally retired, somewhat against his will, as his health isn't what it once was. We've decided to move to Arizona for the climate. Before we leave Chicago, we're hosting a family gathering at the house. Ethan and Logan will both be there with their families. Ethan has 3 children now that you've never met. Logan got married last year. I know you've kept your distance, and I understand why. But things have changed, Claire. Your father may not say it in so many words, but the decision to include you equally in the proceeds from the business sale was his. He recognizes, in his way, the gravity of what happened all those years ago. We would very much like you to attend the gathering next month. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to close old chapters before new ones begin. With love, Mom." She had included the date, time, and address, along with her cell phone number. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. The weight of it felt immense. "Are you going to go?" Sam asked gently, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know," I admitted, looking out at our garden, at the life we had built together. Part of me wants to see what 16 years has done to all of them. Another part thinks it's better to leave the past in the past. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about the invitation constantly. New Horizon Design was thriving, with offices now in 3 states. Sam and I had been married for 8 years, our love a steady, comforting presence in my life. We had twin daughters who had just turned 6, Sophie and Emma. Their laughter the most beautiful sound in the world. My life in Wyoming was rich and fulfilling, built on genuine connections and mutual respect. Did I want to risk reopening old wounds? Did I want my daughters to know the family that had discarded their mother so carelessly? What would you tell Sophie and Emma if they asked why they've never met your parents? Sam asked one night as we discussed the invitation again, sitting on our back deck, the stars already beginning to appear. It was a fair question. Our daughters knew about Sam's family, who visited a couple of times a year from Montana. They had asked about my family occasionally, and I'd always given vague answers about them living far away. I would tell them that sometimes families hurt each other in ways that can't be easily fixed. I said slowly, carefully choosing my words. But I would also tell them that people can change, and that forgiveness is possible, even without forgetting. "Do you believe that, Claire?" Sam asked, his voice soft. "That your family has changed?" I thought about the tentative emails over the years, the careful respect for my boundaries, the equal inheritance that could have easily excluded me. It wasn't full transformation, not a complete erasure of their past, but it was something. "I think they've tried," I said finally. "Whether it's enough, I don't know." After much deliberation, I decided to attend the gathering, but on my terms. I would go alone, leaving Sam and the girls in Wyoming. I would book a hotel rather than staying at the family home, maintaining my independence. And I would limit my visit to just the day of the event, flying in that morning and out the next. A surgical strike, no lingering. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. A large colonial in one of Chicago's affluent suburbs, impressive and imposing. As the Uber dropped me off, the familiar brick facade seemed to loom over me. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked up the familiar path to the front door. My mother answered my knock, her face lighting up with carefully restrained joy. "Claire, you came." "I did," I said, accepting her brief hug with what composure I could manage, my body stiff, unyielding. The gathering was smaller than I expected, mercifully so. Just my parents, my brothers, and their immediate families. Ethan's 3 children, a whirlwind of energy, raced around the backyard, while Logan's wife, Vanessa, a new face, helped my mother bring food to the patio table. My father stood when I entered the backyard, looking much older than I remembered. The confident, sometimes cruel man, who had dominated my childhood, seemed diminished somehow. His frame thinner, his movements more careful, his eyes holding a fragility I hadn't seen before. "Claire," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, a rare crack in his stoic demeanor. He'd never been comfortable showing tenderness. "Dad," I replied with a nod, a simple acknowledgement. The initial awkwardness gradually eased as the afternoon progressed. Ethan's children, curious about their aunt who had lived in the mountains, peppered me with questions about Wyoming, their innocent curiosity a refreshing change. Logan, more subdued than I remembered, asked thoughtful questions about my business, sounding genuinely interested. No one mentioned the abandonment directly, but it hung in the air between us, a silent, unspoken weight, the reason for our 16-year separation. After dinner, as the sky began to darken, my father asked if I would join him in his study, once a forbidden territory, where he conducted business and delivered family disciplinary conversations. A place of fear for me. "I'm not good at this," he began once we were seated, his gaze fixed on his hands, clasped on the desk. "But I owe you an apology, Claire. What we did, what I allowed to happen, it was unforgivable." "Bob." I studied him, this man who had shaped so much of my early life through fear and criticism, who had wielded his power like a weapon. "Why did you do it?" I asked. The question that had haunted me for years, a ghost in my quiet moments. He was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between us, heavy with unspoken history. "My father was cruel to me," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, a raw admission. "He called it toughening me up. I thought that's what fathers did, what families did. It wasn't until you were gone, really gone, that I began to see how wrong it was. It wasn't a complete answer. It certainly wasn't a sufficient excuse for the pain he inflicted, but it was honest. In a way my father had never been with me before. It was a crack in his armor. I built a good life," I told him, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering, despite everything. "I know," he said, nodding, a flicker of something in his eyes that looked like pride. "I followed your company online. You've done well for yourself. better than any of us expected. That was part of the problem, I said quietly, the old truth finding its voice. Your expectations. They were always about what I couldn't do, never what I could. He looked down at his hands, a sigh escaping him. I was wrong about many things. It wasn't the emotional reconciliation scene from a movie. There were no tears, no dramatic embraces, just a quiet acknowledgement between two adults that mistakes had been made, harm had been done, and lessons had been learned, painfully, irrevocably. It was enough. When I left Chicago the next day, I didn't know if I would ever return. I didn't know if the tentative connections reestablished over that brief visit would grow or wither, but I knew that I had faced my past without being diminished by it, that I had shown my family not just that I had survived without them, but that I had thrived. Back in Wyoming, as Sam and the girls welcomed me home with hugs and questions about my trip, I felt a sense of completion, a deep, abiding peace. The abandoned young woman at the gas station had completed her journey, not by finding her way back to those who had discarded her, but by creating a life so full and rich that she could face them as an equal, undiminished by their past cruelty. That night, after the girls were asleep, their soft breathing filling the quiet house, Sam and I sat on our back deck, looking at the countless stars visible in the clear Wyoming sky. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked, his voice soft, contemplative. "I think so," I replied, reaching for his hand, intertwining our fingers. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. The understanding that what happened shaped me, but it doesn't define me anymore. I am not my past. I am my present. I am my future. I thought about all the ways my life had changed since that day 16 years ago. The business I'd built, the family I'd created, the community I'd joined. None of it would have happened if my family hadn't made their cruel joke. Sometimes, the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best versions of ourselves. Sometimes, being left behind is the first step toward finding your way forward. Have you ever experienced a moment when something painful ultimately led you to something better? Share your story in the comments. Life has a way of revealing its purpose in the most unexpected ways, and I'd love to hear how that's played out for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if my journey resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you strength and peace on yours.